Ladies and gentlemen, people of all gender expressions, thank you for checking out the North Bank Media Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Strevens. Joining me on the show this morning was Luc Bouchard. And you may recall Luc was a guest on this show about a year ago, and at that time he was sharing his story about how during the sort of early days of the pandemic, he was able to pivot from his public speaking and communications work to using digital mediums like Zoom and webinars and things like that, Meetup, as a way to get his message out there and in fact reach an even larger audience that way. And so a year later or so, he's pivoted again, but he seems to have found another way in which he can use digital communications and digital mediums like Facebook specifically to reach a wide audience and get his message out there. So really interesting. I didn't know that Luc was undertaking these spiritual lessons through the Course of Miracles. So we talked a little bit about that, but we also talked about the communications and the business end of things that he's undergoing. I don't want to really go into too much of it here, A, because I don't remember it, and B, I just think you want to hear the discussion unfold to really get a sense of, again, what Luc has been able to do. So a really interesting one, a discussion that touched on communications as well as spirituality and philosophy, and someone I look up to and someone I enjoy speaking with, and it was great to reconnect with him. So enjoy this one, a conversation with the very wise Luc Bouchard. All right. Luc, man, good to see you on the podcast again. You were one of the original guests about a year ago, so I always thought it'd happen again sooner, but here we are.
Right on. How is that going? That's you've been as it weekly? I haven't.
No worries. I try to average about 2 a week.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm getting into kind of the low 80s, mid 80s as far as episode count.
Right on.
Yeah.
That's good. It's that, for someone who's done a lot of webinars, that's no small thing to be able to do that and consistently do it, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, and consistency is the key, and that's, in some ways you kind of inspired me to start it with what you were doing on your webinar journey, and it's like you just kept doing it. You just never stop.
That's true. That's true. Well, I don't know if I inspired you, but yes, that's true. I did never stop. Yeah. So
you did.
Let me put me more in the center here. Okay, there we go.
So and not to air personal laundry, but it might make for interesting conversation. We came pretty close for a short period of time, and then our paths diverged a little bit. So I'm just curious, and we'll get into kind of the transformation you're going through here. But what's kind of been going on lately?
Well, there was always, for the people that don't know our working relationship, you are my go-to videographer when I need any work done. Mm-hmm. However, that hasn't happened since before COVID,
right?
Because my video production company, Barebones Communications, I long stopped shooting content a long time ago because I just really wanted somebody who had the skill set, and you definitely fill within that bracket. And so once we went into COVID, I had to kind of figure out what I was going to do. And so I had these presentations that I started doing these live webinars with these presentations. And within a year, I did 290-minute web events.
Wow.
And that stopped they slowly trickled out. I think I finally finished them in July. Okay. When I finally did that. But by that time, it would have been closer to probably 230, 240. And I was able to do that because we had the CERB money coming in, the money from the federal government in Canada here, and so then I had the latitude to keep doing that. Then I landed a role as a chief marketing officer, and that was pretty much a part-time gig. And I shot a lot of content starting in February to July. And I'm on paper still with them.
Oh, good.
I probably shouldn't be saying that on camera, but I'm still with them. And I was starting to look for work, and now I've been compelled to do something totally different, and that is on my spiritual path, which is based on Course of Miracles.
Interesting, Course of Miracles. Well, yeah. So it was kind of funny because I got the email a while back that Barebones, Meetup group was shutting down, and it felt like kind of the end of an era in a way. It was like, if
definitely a chapter in my life,
right?
Yeah, definitely a chapter in my life.
But again, like we talked about this last time, so we don't have to beat it. But like you were able to turn that webinar effort into a job with a company overseas. Like to me that was maybe one of the few positives of how the shift occurred in the last few years.
Right. Yeah, it was this is speaks to some of my philosophy, and I'll start with a quote by Woody Allen, and that is 80% of success is showing up.
Hmm.
And just putting yourself out there. So I started doing these webinars, and I had no idea what the market would bear. I had no idea what I could charge in the United States from it, because that's where I was ending marketing to, just because of the fact that the population base.
Right.
And I secured one client, then I secured another client, and that client led me to the software company that I'm a chief marketing officer with in Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
And that has given me, a really good foundation toehold in so many ways to be able to apply to any companies that are looking for remote workers. And I lost the question, or did I answer it?
I think you answered it. I just think it was you were someone that pivoted early, and you pivoted seemingly in the right way.
Well, and I pivoted hard. Somebody said to me once, you don't do things in a small way, you do things big. And so that pivoting really was, well, what else am I going to do with my time? And was able to use my skills and start really just being of service to people, and really just showing up and just helping them out. And that led to many things and many opportunities.
Right on. So then I guess I don't really know what happened, but one day I started seeing some of this new Facebook content, and I thought, oh, Jesus, like literally Jesus, you've you've undergone some kind of born again experience, or were you always a religious guy? Or maybe talk a little bit about what it is that you're doing now.
Sure, absolutely. So Course in Miracles is actually it's not meant to be a religion. It's spiritual, and people see the content I'm putting out right now, and they presume it's very religious because it talks about God, it talks about spirituality, I'll talk about the Holy Spirit. And so I've only really started to study Course in Miracles in the last 5 years. Something happened, my life went off the rails, and I had to find, as for so many people do, when things aren't going well, we turn to spirituality or religion to try and help us through. And the message really worked, and it was something that I've just continued to apply more myself to, and study more and more. But at the heart of it is this idea of what is forgiveness.
Okay.
And forgiveness is something that I remember 10 years ago. How old would have my daughter been? Let's our measure. Yeah, probably 10, 12 years ago. I was kind of curious as to what forgiveness is. So I was asking people that I thought I would know. I started with my mother, who was alive at the time, as a good Catholic. And I said, Mom, what does it mean to forgive someone? And she shocked me when she did this.
Whoa.
It was like a good Catholic like you should, in my mind, right, should know what forgiveness is. And then she started giving me all these books on forgiveness, which I didn't really feel compelled to read. And then I talked to spiritual leaders, and I talked to different people, and it was curious. No one had a resounding, very clear definition as to what forgiveness is until I found it in the Merriam-Webster dictionary. And that surprised me the most.
Right.
Because all it said is forgiving someone is choosing to no longer be angry at them. And they don't even need to know it. It's
that's interesting.
Yeah, it's just like they don't need to know that you're no longer angry with them. So I think it was the Buddha that had said that anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Something along that, right?
Sure.
So this was very curious about, well, what does it mean to forgive someone and choosing to no longer be upset with them, or no longer hold grievances with them? And then what I thought of the idea of forgiving a loan. So let's say I owe you $1,000, and I haven't been able to follow through with my commitment to paying you back, and it doesn't look like it's anywhere, but it's getting in the relationship because now I'm avoiding you because I owe you money. You don't know if you should say anything. It's just kind of getting in the way, and you come to a conclusion that is, hypothetically, of course, that you know what, the money is not worth what it does to our relationship. It does. It's just getting in the way, and you're far too. It's something along the lines of, "You're far too important to me, Luke. So let's just pretend the loan didn't happen, and I'm going to forgive the loan."
Okay.
And one spiritual teacher did tell me forgiveness is the idea of going back to the state that we were in before the error happened, before something. So
Interesting.
we go before the event.
Hmm.
And so we just look at that. So it's like a reset. If you forgive the loan and say, it's, you know what, Luke, I know you're trying. Maybe you'll pay me back one day, but let's just forget it happened,
Mm-hmm.
and let's just move forward, because it's getting in the way of us.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
something so crucial in there, and it's a realization that I've had recently too. Is that, like you say, I don't have to tell you necessarily that I've forgiven you, but because so much of the world exists as objects in my mind, right? And I'm
It's
choosing
so
to
true.
I'm choosing
Yeah.
to assign meaning. So it's like I'm living with this. I'm mad at you. It actually means nothing. It only exists inside me. And I think if people could start to make that shift a little bit more, we could come to a place of understanding more.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's a term I heard a long time ago is, are people living rent free in your head?
Sure.
Because I have like an example of this. I remember, oh, jeepers, this was back in 2000, 2001 maybe.
Okay.
I was going up a ski lift at Lake Louise, and when I went to get off of it, the attendants that were supposed to be watching were having a snowball fight, and I fell and I started getting dragged
Holy.
around. And then it was like when the chairlift went around, it was a drop.
Back down the mountain.
And it would literally, I was fearing for my life, right? And I got so pissed off. I was so angry at these guys. And if I dwell on it too much, that could be like it happened yesterday.
Right. You're right back there.
And yeah, and that doesn't serve me. Why, these guys probably, well, I went and complained, not that helped, but it was, it's living in my head. It's not living in their head. They've probably forgotten it, or I was just one of those, old pissed off kind of skiers that
right.
they had to avoid and whatnot. So yeah, so it really is this idea of being able to, it's like, is it worth it?
Mm-hmm. Is it worth it?
Is my peace of mind worth being pulled sideways because someone is I hold a grievance with them?
Mm-hmm. It's funny you say living rent free in people's heads. I immediately thought of Donald Trump and the whole Trump derangement syndrome. It's like, how many people justified their own existence, major news networks, just because of this guy? And he probably cared. I mean, he probably fed off it and gained more power from it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because and it really was about this ability to look externally and go, either, the camps. It was pretty divided. I don't know if there was much middle ground with him. Either you loved him or you hated him, but so many, and myself included, just gave so much power to him, right? Because I just remember when a friend of mine was like a Trump supporter, which shocked me. I was quite upset, and I realized, why am I so upset?
Yeah.
Like, why is this a problem? And I realized that I had a lot of fear as to what he could do. So then I was giving him my power.
Sure.
Because what he might be able to do and whatnot, and that was a bit of a shift. But it's certainly, there's certainly a lot of controversy around that, and that's something he does quite well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I just saw, not to beat on Trump, but I just did see he has got a small scale model of Mount Rushmore with his head included among the other guys, that says it all.
Yeah, no kidding. And who knows, if I had his money, maybe I would do something like that. I don't know.
Come on.
Yeah,
I know. Yeah. And I do think that too, with the way, like, the politicization of the pandemic, and now I also think the alarmism around climate change is going to be dealt with the same way, where people are inflicting outwardly on others a way to live, a way to think, because of some perceived issues. So much of politics to me is like mental states and emotions.
Right. Absolutely. And I think you said it earlier really well, whatever we're seeing externally is a reflection as to how we see the world.
Right.
And one of the best examples I like to use with that is, let's say you and I are standing in line to go into a movie theater.
Okay.
And we have our tickets, and we're just waiting to get in, and we're and there's no doubt we're getting in. And let's say the movie theater holds 500 people and we're 150 in. There's no doubt about that.
Right.
So we're standing there talking,
Mm-hmm.
catching up, and we see someone cut into the line ahead of us.
Mm-hmm.
You look at that and go, well, that's pretty ballsy. I wish I had the intestinal fortitude not to care whatever people think. And I
Right.
look at it and I get pissed off.
Right.
I lose my shit. And it's just like, we just had the same stimulus. We just had the exact same experience.
Right. Right.
Why is it that you're seeing it as something that is non-effectual? And then I start complaining and I start saying statements to this guy to hear.
Right.
And you're looking at me and you're going, Luke, like, we're now talking about this guy, not about that.
Right.
Why is it that I'm internalizing that as I've been harmed and you're not?
Well, good question. I mean, it reminds me of something we talked about way back in the day at your course that I took, where it's like you in this scenario are coming from this fear or sort of, what is it, scarcity mindset, where it's like he's somehow taking something from you.
That's right. That's right. The perception of loss, all of our fears and anxieties are based on the fact that we believe we're going to lose something.
Right.
And so somehow this perception is that I've been harmed in some way, but it's my perception and I haven't been harmed. Even if we hadn't gotten to the movie, which in the scenario was not possible, there was no real harm, except for how I decide to lose my peace of mind.
Exactly. The harm then occurs inside.
Yes, yeah.
And you do it and then you've done it to yourself, I guess.
Yeah. Because somehow this person who is, I'll probably never see again, probably never really know, is now, affecting me in a way that is like, really, is that worth it?
Right.
Yeah.
So, well, I guess what I thought was interesting then is you've taken this way of thinking, this approach, and you've started to sort of market a way in which you can, I guess, teach it or impart.
Yeah, I wish I could say it was deliberate. I wish I could say it was a master plan. I wish I could say I had the intelligence to plan this all out. And I know that this is going to sound very, may sound very religious or spiritual, but really, I just showed up and I was really the messages came through me. So where it started was I happened to be I was on a Zoom call with my group, that my Course of Miracles, and it's a Sunday morning, and Micah, who is facilitating the group, she happened to be on that day. Somebody was talking about the fact of, how do you forgive someone who really has bad behavior towards you? And they don't have a problem with their bad behavior. Like, how do you move past that? Because this behavior is in my face.
Right.
How do we do that? And what Micah had said was, well, you have to forgive yourself for believing that anything happened. Just like in the lineup we were talking about.
Right.
I believe I was harmed some way, and I have to forgive myself for believing that. And when she said that, it was like it stuck, and I could not let it go. This idea of forgiving myself for believing that something has happened to me. And then 5 days later, it was a Friday morning when I'm supposed to be actually looking for a job. It was like, okay, I'm just going to, because they just kept rattling around my brain. And I thought, what I have to do is I just want to write them out just to get them out. And so I can focus back on my work. And then within 2 hours, I had over 125 written.
Holy hell!
Yeah, and they just kept coming, and I'm driving to Staples, and I'm talking into making notes on my cell phone, and I'm doing stuff. And one of them was, I forgive myself for believing that I should be doing anything other than I am right now.
That's a big one.
Because right then and there, I should be looking for work, but I'm writing these things out.
Right.
And I'm going to run out of money. So I forgive myself for believing that I'm not resourced. I forgive myself for believing that I'm some of the other ones is that people are going to judge me for doing this. And so I wrote them out, and then it was okay. But then what came up next was, well, I actually need to see how they look like in a card deck. And I have it right here.
Oh, cool.
So what I did was I just printed them on paper,
Mm.
and let's see, forgive myself for believing I'm in competition with anyone,
Mm.
right?
Nice.
And forgive myself for believing that others can hurt me. So I did these, and then I started showing to people, and then it was like, well, the next step. So what's the next step?
Right.
And then the next step was literally, um, I got into some fear about my intellectual property, even though it's not mine.
Mm.
So I thought, well, how do I claim these in a way in this day and age that I can show ownership on them? So
Okay.
then it made sense to me to start putting them on Instagram.
Yeah.
And so then I started releasing images on Instagram, and I was doing them every day.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started what was called Luke's Reductions, where I'd
Right.
actually interpret the picture, because I'd put this picture on with these words. And I have a deck here, so of an actual printed one. So let me just, I didn't know if I was going to use these. I should have had them ready. So yeah, um, here's one. I forgive myself for believing that I have to justify my experience.
Oh, neat. Existence.
And
Justify.
existence, yeah,
Oh,
my
yeah.
experience, yeah, existence, yeah. So, and these are all my own images and whatnot. So I started doing that, and then
Hmm.
I had to start taking a lot of pictures to be able to go with them. That's all. I was going to use stock photography, but
Right.
then it was just like, no, I want to use my own pictures because I can, and I could
Absolutely.
use my macro lens. And then so I started doing that, and then I created 100 of these actual images that I started releasing on Instagram,
Wow.
and my reductions got more and more detailed. And I remember, one day I spent 3 hours writing my reductions, and it came up with 3 lines.
Oh, so not
Yeah.
all of them were valuable then, or
Well, it's just that I really need to had to constantly just refine and refine and
mm-hmm.
refine, but it
Gotcha.
was a 3 hour endeavor. And so I was releasing on Instagram, and then I was having friends telling me you should be doing this on Facebook.
Mm.
And I know Instagram is part of Facebook, but I had no interest. And I'm not sure where you're at. I know I've seen some of your posts on Facebook.
It's all part of the metaverse now, man. It's whatever.
Yeah. But I had multiple Facebook pages that I
Okay.
tried to use and to do, and I never really got it. And my what I've often said about Facebook is that my problem isn't that I'm indifferent to Facebook. My problem is I'm indifferent to my indifference.
Like you don't
I,
care that you don't care.
I don't care that I don't care. And that was part of the thing. And so then 2 weeks ago, actually, two, 3 Tuesdays. So yeah, so we're Thursday. So two Tuesdays ago,
Mm-hmm.
I decided to actually shift and start uploading them to Facebook, and start making this and rebranding myself
Yep.
on this. And again, the whole time I'm still not looking for work, and I'm doing this. And I start with my Facebook group. I have 355 friends on Facebook,
Okay.
and for whatever reason, the message works for people, because now I'm pushing. The last I looked this morning, and I'm at 4,139.
Friends?
Yeah,
In how long?
less than just over 2 weeks.
Holy shit.
Yeah,
How is that
yeah.
possible?
I don't know. Actually,
Whoa.
I don't know,
Talk
because
about
I
growth.
don't. What's that?
Talk about growth of an audience.
Yeah, it's absolutely, it really quite shocks me and surprises me. Now I'm no longer indifferent to Facebook, let me tell you.
Yeah. You are
Right?
very what's the
I'm in
opposite? You're in. Yeah.
a whore. I'm a Facebook whore. Let's just say it
Sure.
that
Yeah.
way.
Okay. You said it.
Yeah. So Facebook, the algorithm, which I don't understand, was allowing me to invite
Wow.
people for the first week unbridled.
Hmm.
I could invite as many people as I wanted to, and I was started with people that I knew who had big lists. So, and people, I have this one person. I consider, she probably wouldn't like me calling her this, but my spiritual leader,
Okay.
who is reluctant to be called that, Sarah, and and she had a huge list. So I would just like anyone she had, because you know how Facebook gives you those connections.
Right.
And people started, and I went from having a connection of 5 or 6 to 30s to 100, 200 likes. And I was just not like similar friends in common.
Okay.
So I think what people were seeing is that when I was connected to Sarah, so they would just accept me because they implicit with trust with her,
Nice.
and then my growth was exponential. Like it was just not go. And then people started asking me to be friends.
Interesting.
And then last week it all changed when Facebook all of a sudden said, no, you cannot invite anyone else. And I'm going, what do you mean I can't invite
Right.
anyone else? And they totally put the brakes on. And for 2 days I couldn't invite anyone. It was like they kind of caught up, or they kind of figured out that something. And then it's been much more controlled. I
Okay.
can only invite so many. And um and so, but really, I it's averaging anywhere from 100 to 125 a day that people are my friend list has gone up.
Wow.
And as you know, I do marketing, right?
Yeah.
That's how we came together. I was hiring. I had you come along to shoot the videos that people were hiring for me,
Right.
or hiring me to do. But
Right.
my whole bare bones communications was about succinct messaging. And I was starting to talk to people. I'm saying, is this normal? Do people, when they start Facebook, because I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't know the
Right.
difference between following and friending, and how you could unfollow people but still have them as friends. Literally, I had no clue as to how it worked, because I didn't care.
Right.
And so I was talking to people, and they're saying, no, that's not usual at all. That's very unusual. And that's where I figured out that there's something about the messaging that works with people.
Right.
And the thing is that my banner on my Facebook page was still bare bones communications. And someone said to me, they sent me a friend request. When I sent them a friend request, they said, you know, you're about profit equals succinct messaging equal profits, because that was one of my, and goes, but you look like a real person. And so I changed the banner, because what didn't occur to me that there's an incongruency of the
Sure.
message of forgiveness, and then messaging equals profits.
Right.
But I probably gained 2,000 people with that banner before I changed it. So somehow people were seeing past I think what they do, they went to my page when I invited them, and they would see something like this,
Right.
or something like this.
Right.
And I forgive myself for believing. And the other thing that was amazing, of the probably 4 or 5 thousand people I've invited to be my friend on that,
4,000 or 5,000.
a handful said, wait a minute, who are you? I don't know you.
Right. And the rest
Of
just
all those, everyone
right.
else just accepted me along. And it was this guy saying, you look like you're a real person, but you have this profit on the thing on profit. So so that really speaks to the when the message is succinct and to the point and consistent, it resonates with people. And of course, the images I'm using, like some of these images are just, I don't know if you can see that really well, right?
Just
But
dead
they're just
flowers.
really,
Very
yeah,
like simple, natural.
yeah, simple, natural, and easy to read. And
Right.
anyone out there who's doing Facebook posts, if you can't read your messaging and the type is too small, no one's going to read it. It may be the best thing in the world, but I see all the stuff that people post all the time, and it's just like, who can read that?
Interesting.
Or
Yeah.
too much information, just because they put a paragraph in
Right.
on
Nobody.
a post. Yeah, no way on that.
Wow, man.
So yeah, so with that and the traction I've attained, and that seems to be continuing. I've started a business Facebook page on that, so I'm driving traffic to that. But Facebook only allows you to invite 50 people a day to like your Facebook page, your business page.
Okay.
So that's going to take a long time.
Right.
And then as a way to see if this has any legs, I've started a Patreon page.
Oh, nice.
How familiar are you with Patreon? Because I knew nothing about it except for like 3 weeks ago.
Oh, a little bit I know about it. There's one podcast that I am a patron of, but I don't. I mean, I've thought about doing it myself, but again, I don't think the audience is there. But you might be a different story.
Well, this is what we're going to see, and in the marketing world, if you convert, they say that um, what is it? 3% is a good conversion rate. If you can get if you send people through a funnel or wherever, and 3% converts, that actually, and some people I've heard even 7, and it's just like, no, 7 is like 7 is
Getting
just
high.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, really high on that. It's 2.5 to 5 somewhere. So I'm
Okay.
saying 3. And if I convert, if I get to my 5,000 people, which it looks like it's going to happen, because like I said, it's just keep growing. My 5,000 friends, and I send them to Patreon. Hopefully, they will,
Sure.
they will like that.
Right.
So
And then you have a monthly. That's a monthly.
that's exactly. So what it's going to be is I'm still going to release content on Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
but on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, they're going to see an image such as this.
Mm-hmm.
And I took that, and I'm very proud of that. And I'm
That's a
sure
great
you'd be
shot.
impressed with it. Yeah,
Pelicans
that was on.
in
Yeah,
front of a beaver
Pelicans
dam.
in front of on Amisk Lake by Boyle
Okay.
in a canoe.
Wow.
Yeah, no, kayak. I was in a kayak.
Even
Anyway,
even
yeah,
riskier.
so yeah, and especially since it's unstable. So I'll be releasing pictures like this,
Mm-hmm.
and then if they want to see the reduction, they'll have to go to Patreon and become a member.
And the reduction is a more expanded.
It's explaining what exactly it means.
I said this to a guest the other night, and I'll say it again. You are a master marketer.
Well, we'll see.
We'll see. I just want to make sure we're being clear here. You just started posting these images with the short caption on Facebook, and
Yep.
and suddenly you were noticing an uptick in friend requests.
Yes.
Just like that.
Yeah. I one day I woke up to 40 friend requests.
So were people sharing these posts? They must have been.
They are. Yeah. I'm getting some sharing. I don't know how they're finding me. I'm not really sure. Now, I want to be clear that that one morning where I had 40 friend requests, 25% of those were of Asian women, young Asian women wanting to, so I had to go through like 10 of them that were just, and as much as I like to hear I have really nice skin, I still have a hard time.
Yeah.
I still have a hard time believing they actually are, as a what looks to be like a 20 or 21-year-old young woman. Why would she be interested in me? Like, besides some sort of other agenda.
Right. So a certain percentage of them were bots or were trolls or whatever you want to say.
Yeah. Or I get from another and I don't want to put any stereotypes, or I'm not going to say where, but I'm from one particular country. I friend people, or I request them to be friends, or they request me to be friends, and they're calling me on Messenger. And it's like, and they're sending me these long texts, and some are asking for money. But I had to. One guy this morning, he was calling me and wanting to do astrology for me. And it was interesting because there seems to be a certain countries that do things consistently. So the young Asian women are from one country, and then these people calling me and thinking I'm going to answer the phone, that was from another country in across the seas.
Okay, so it's almost like you broke through into another stratosphere of another sort of corner of Facebook, if you will, where these sorts of it sounds like they're scamming essentially, but you got visibility in another world.
Well, I suspect that some of them, yes, it may be a carefully constructed scam, but there's some people that are trying to get money for children, what looks like to be orphanages, and I don't know if that's true or not. And I think it's, this is a business opportunity.
Yeah.
Pure and simple. If I'm going to be honest, I'm doing this to get in front of people so I can show my forgiveness statements to them and hopefully make a change. But it is a business opportunity.
For sure.
Yeah. And so when I I will be like, I've delivered, I gave out 90 days of content on Instagram,
Okay.
where I was just doing these images. And now it's going to be moving towards, because I know there are people, and this is the other thing, Patrick, which
Yeah.
has been interesting, is people have been, not a lot, but people can give me money. In one day, I got like $322. A friend of mine, actually, you know what tithing is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
So a
you pay
friend
the
of
church.
Yeah. So actually, it wasn't a bucket list thing where somebody tithed to me, but what my friend said was, is that I said because this friend is a Course in Miracles student, and they
Okay.
said, and Course in Miracles can be very difficult to read if you. It can be thick, and that's part of the
Okay.
reason people stop reading it. But what she said is that I get more. I learn so much from your writings, and I've been a lifelong tither, and whoever brings me peace in my spirituality, I give money to. And so she gave me 10% of her income, and that was $222.
So I'd be
And
remiss if I didn't jump in here and ask you about the moral and ethical conflict here of the content that you're marketing, and it's a business, but also,
yep.
I mean, how sincere are you in what you're saying? And have you had this debate in your mind?
Not only in my mind, a good friend of mine suggested that because it is spiritual, I should not be asking for money for it,
I mean,
and that yeah,
but also
and,
that's an external creation in his mind. I mean,
yeah,
for you, it's a
yeah,
business, so you should be asking
yeah.
for money. But
Well, it's I think of there are. I'm trying to think of someone who might be contemporary that everyone would know. Um, Here's my question.
okay.
What is the difference between somebody who is really creative, such as an artist that has a spirit and is able to draw art
Mm-hmm.
of, let's say, that is of Jesus praying, or of a mosque, of this beautiful mosque, or of a temple,
Mm-hmm.
and they sell them, and they sell those images? like 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 this idea that because it's spiritual that I shouldn't make a living from it really
Right.
kind of confuses me.
No, for sure.
Yeah, and the thing is that this is, and maybe I'm justifying, maybe I'm rationalizing it, but the thing is that if these bring you peace,
Right.
then and you want more,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not, and I, like I said, I put out 90. I did 90 every day that they're free to access. If people want to go to my Instagram
Mm-hmm.
account, they can see them there, and they're going to have all that. And the thing is that I really feel that my right now, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and I would not be able to do this if I had to have a job.
Right.
And honestly, I'm spending anywhere, like I said, 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
It's minimally 1 hour to write a reduction, up to 3 hours. So I'm spending eight to 12 hours a week on creating content that other people are enjoying.
I mean, what better thing to do, right?
Right. And so if people find that distasteful,
Mm-hmm.
that I am profiting from it, they'll just have to forgive me.
Right. You've already forgiven yourself for it,
I
so
have forgiven myself. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Because there are many people in the Course in Miracles space who write, like Marianne Williamson's is a big Course in Miracles student.
Okay.
She writes a lot. Nelson Mandela used for his inaugural speech.
Hmm.
People think he wrote this, but he drew from Marianne Williamson,
Hmm.
and she has a lot of books. There is David Hoffmeister who makes money from it.
Mm-hmm.
There is Gary Renard. These are people that are, and many others that are gurus in the space who
Mm-hmm.
sell books, and I don't see any difference.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, I'm all for it. Because I also think that any real salvation and forgiveness and all that occurs inside anyway. So if you're prompting people in that way, I mean, you're not pretending to do it for them.
Right.
You're not giving them like you're not really the guru here. You're not the icon. You're not.
No, I am the conduit. I am the conduit.
Right.
And the money that people have given me was unsolicited. I didn't see it coming. And it was, and like I said, I got like $222 from a friend on one day, and then later that day I got another 100 from another friend saying keep it up and keep going. And it was like, okay, I will do that and I'll accept that. And the money actually is going to have 100 of these cards printed. No, 100, sorry, no, 500 or 1,000 printed. So I can basically, and I will sell them and give them out to people. And, and of course because I got 12 printed here in Edmonton, and that was like $300. And if I get them out of China in a box, in a custom box, they work out to be like for 500, like, less than $5, like less than $4 a piece. No, less than $5 a piece.
Right.
So it's the volume thing, right? And there's that whole ethical concern about doing that and the footprint and those kind of things, right?
Well, that's kind of it, right? Like when you get this proud Canadian T-shirt and then it's made in China. But I mean, that's again. I mean, I appreciate that you're being upfront that this is a business and marketing endeavor. But what is it, content-wise, you think you've stumbled on that people are? Because I think for one thing, we're so divided as people, like politically and socially, but also internally, we're divided and we're distracted. Do you think? What is it that you're hitting on here? Is it that's people?
I'm really glad you asked that, and I would like to. I don't know, but I have some ideas.
Okay.
So at minimally, forgiveness starts with yourself. And it's good that you want to forgive other people, but if you can't, how can you forgive anyone else if you can't forgive yourself?
You can't, truly.
Yeah, and it starts with that. The second thing is it takes a fair amount of humility to go, maybe I was wrong. Maybe the way I'm seeing it is not accurate. Maybe my perception of the situation is fallible because memory is fallible, or maybe there's another way of seeing it.
Right.
And I think that in a world where we blame other people for our happiness, there's a segment of the population that just doesn't, they don't buy it, they don't believe it, and it just doesn't resonate with them. So when I make statements with very stylized images of, let me just pull one here. I forgive myself for believing that I don't deserve to be forgiven. And that's a flower on there. That's better like that.
Nice.
And so I think that what people are suffering from is a lack of peace of mind. And the peace of mind that we don't have is usually based on things that we've done in the past that we feel guilty for, or things that we're worried that are going to happen. But either or, so if this is back behind us and this is the future, either or, we're not in the moment. We're not in the here and now.
Yeah.
And that's what and simply put, Course in Miracles 101, and I have my book here because I was using it. Course in Miracles 101 is a miracle is when we choose to see it differently. That's all a miracle is. And also when we choose to not hold a grievance with someone, that is a miracle. So it is a simple idea that you're open to the idea that maybe it's not accurate. Maybe God forbid I'm wrong in my assertion that you're a asshole, right, Patrick.
Yeah. Well,
somehow you're the one that has done this to me.
Right.
You're the one that has caused me all my suffering. And I think that people know that they're not happy. They know they're not content, and they are looking for something. And I think I just happen to think that my message is presented in a way that people go, oh, I get that.
Right.
That makes sense to me, because like they're really short, succinct, and then there's this image that is either the images I use. So my criteria for my images are that they either support the message or they fly in the face of the message.
Cool.
So it's kind of like a contradictory
Right.
to that. And the other things is I shoot images where there's tension and contrast. So anything that will kind of
Absolutely.
inherently show some sort of conflict
Right.
and high contrast. So there was like here I can't think of one that's more tension than I forgive
Oh
myself for
man.
believing that I'm not responsible for what shows up in my life, and that's my skeleton Phil, who is short for philosophy. But
Phil.
it's yeah. I think what it does is at some point it almost, not that I want to do this, but it's a bit of a, it's like, what am I supposed to do with that? And then they're drawn in.
It causes the whatever that lever to stop, and then they have to think consciously, what am I looking at here?
Yeah. So yeah, it does create some cognitive dissonance where
Yes.
people are going, I don't know what to think about that,
Mm-hmm.
and they want to find out more, and and but I think people I so not a very popular person to talk about in this day and age, but when I was in grade 11 in Montreal.
Mm.
I'm from Alberta. My mother went on teacher exchange, so I found myself in grade 11 in Montreal. And we happened to see Bill Cosby. And so this would have been in 1980,
Right.
a while ago. And what do I remember about seeing Bill Cosby is him talking about peace of mind,
Interesting.
and how back then what he was saying and his shtick was is that we all just want peace of mind. And he would, so I think there is something universal about people wanting peace of mind
Hmm.
and being able to let it go. And
Right.
the question is very simple when I work with people, and I do coaching with people on that, is that does this serve you, and do you feel is it working for you? Is holding on to this,
Mm-hmm.
is this person's behaviors worth your peace of mind?
Man, I do think that's it. It's ironic that Cosby was out there asking for peace of mind when he probably needed some at the time too.
Yes,
Given the
yes. His history, his
the
long history
split,
of what he
yeah,
did. Yeah, yeah.
right.
But that was his separation from God.
Yes.
And he was looking for things to feel connected, and
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately he did in a way that was anything but connected to God.
Right, right. I wonder too if there's not something about the what do you want to say, the tense of the way you write those things. So when I see that image, I say I,
Right.
and now I've just spoken. I forgive
Yeah.
myself. It's like, oh shit, I haven't said that in 20 years.
Right. Right. I am curious, Patrick, that we had and I'm putting you on the spot here because this is totally unscripted, which is what I really love about this.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember you talking about back when we were shooting content and back when we were working together,
Right.
and any of you that haven't seen Patrick's work, he is phenomenal at what he does. Like, you guys got to check out his video production because
Thanks,
he
Luke.
knows this stuff. And if you need someone, and you're local, you should definitely talk to Patrick. And I wouldn't say that if I didn't mean that. But I remember you talking about the fact that you had decided that you needed to do some things different in your life,
Mm.
and that you're looking at, how do I want to spend my time, and I remember one of the things that was really stood out for me is, how do I want to be as a man?
Hmm.
And you were following some people, and they're talking about, and this is what I remember, maybe memory's fallible, but
Sure.
talking about, how do you spend your time, and what do you want to do, and what kind of commitments do you want to keep, and
Right.
do you want to waste your time with frivolous things
Mm.
that are not there? And I got a sense that there was a real calling and a desire and a yearning
Mm-hmm.
to be a better person.
Okay.
Is that?
I would like to think so. I appreciate you saying that. I think and that's part of what this podcast was, and it was a journey on well, we talked about it, but it's that path of least resistance to the self. Like, people say, I'm a carpenter, I'm a father, what about just I'm me, and all the hats that I wear, the things that I do are extensions of me or representations of me, because I'm huge. I'm infinite, actually.
Right, right. Which is a Course in Miracles belief. Yeah.
So, right, part of this podcast was like, I wanted to become a better speaker, better thinker, better communicator, find out what I really thought. And now 80 some episodes in, I'm kind of getting there, and I've teased about just stopping because I've had enough of this, and I figured, I've joking that I figured it out, but I figured a lot out, and part of what I figured out was that, and like people said this, like Nietzsche said this, Dostoevsky said this, is that in a society where we take God out of the picture, like God truly, it doesn't change the fact that humans need a religious structure, a religious icon in their life, and what's happening now is that people are filling it with everything other than the highest meaning. There's
Right.
and for me, I've said before that maybe the highest meaning is just pursuit of that ideal self.
Right.
In the image of God, God is perfect. God is perfect.
Right. Well, and further to that, and we've and I'm sure we've talked about this, but when I create video content for myself or for anyone else, what I would be looking for is the pinnacle of good content. So, content, video content, all content, but specifically video content, because this is your and my arena, needs to be one of three things. It needs to surprise and delight people. It needs to educate them, and that comes along with surprise and delight. And those are good. And if you have that, your content, if you know your target audience, is probably good. But the pinnacle of good content is calling people to a higher purpose, calling them out of themselves, calling them to do something, where it's this idea of let's do this together. And what that is that's a form of joining. That's a form of communion, where communion is not in you're getting the going to the Catholic Church communion, but commune with someone on that communication. Right.
Damn.
So when you have that connection, and you are if somebody who's depressed wants to get out of their depression, if they can, is go and be of service to other people.
Yes,
give of yourself.
Exactly. Get out of yourself and maybe do something. It's one of those weird things where, like, sometimes you need the external world. You need to really work on building the internal mental world. But if it's not working, then you're right. You need to go and commune and find out what the hell's what are you missing?
Yeah. The other thing you had said about that, using religion or spirituality, because there's a lot of people that are very religious, but they're not very spiritual, and who have this kind of very interesting ethics about what they say they believe and what they do believe, or what they do is two different things. But I think of statistically, what we know is that people who are in partnership or married in the same faith have longer marriages.
Makes sense.
Because they have something they can go to, because they have their faith first, and then they have that connection. So there's that common ground that you can have with someone, where you have the same, it doesn't matter if whatever their spiritual path is,
right,
and all are right, because if it brings you peace of mind, then there's nothing, then that is what you were looking for. But it is that purpose of something bigger than ourselves that I think we have to look for. And when we don't have that, well, that's where despair comes in. That's where anxiety comes in. That's where fear comes in. That's where addictions come in.
Yep.
Because we're looking at something outside of ourselves because we don't have it. And there's also the saying that you need how you learn something is by teaching it. And so what I'm doing so much with these forgiveness cards is learning about forgiveness by saying to other people in my own quirky kind of weird way of saying, look at it this way, and from that I serve myself.
Right, because it's not like you're putting this out there as if you're the man on the mountain who's figured it all out. We're getting a glimpse into your transformation here.
And I do tote myself for this space as a Course in Miracles forgiveness coach, because I needed to call myself something, and just so that it was like, well, what is that? So I did that, much to my chagrin and my reluctance, because there's no shortage of coaches out there that you can draw upon. But I lost my point. I forgot where I was going with that.
That's okay. So you were reluctant to brand yourself as such. Have you had anybody take you up on the coaching offer yet?
No, because that's going through Patreon, and where
Okay.
I'm going to be doing that. But I did have someone actually send me a text or send me a message in Facebook on one of my posts and whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
and where she talked about her path to forgiveness, and she said to me, is this, what was this your experience on your, or how did you start to learn how to forgive?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I chose to do, because the other reason why I'm reluctant to do Facebook is that I don't want my private life out there.
Mm.
I don't want people to know about my marital status. I don't
That's
want them.
fair.
I don't want them to show pictures of my kids. I don't
Right.
I don't want to do any of that. That's why the platform doesn't resonate.
Mm.
But what she asked me on my path to forgiveness was the fact that, my particular history is my mother left my father when I was 3.5.
Mm.
And then she had a nervous breakdown and we all ended up in foster care.
Oh,
And
wow.
then she got us back, and then she got her teaching degree, and then she was transient. And as a teacher, she was still transient. And we moved, by the time I was 18, she moved us 16 times.
Holy. That's
So
traumatizing.
it was something, well, I knew nothing else.
Sure.
Yeah, and that was, and there you get a bit of a different worldview when you don't grow up in one town. You kind of see the things the
I
same. And
I bet, yeah.
yeah, and grade grade 12, I graduated in Stony Plain. Grade 11 was Montreal. Grade 10 through 7 was Drayton Valley. Then Evansburg, Entwistle, or not Evansburg, and the Tomahawk, and blah blah blah. If you know Alberta, you know some of these towns. But the point is that I had to look at where I was not happy and not having peace, and that was through counseling, and that
Mm-hmm.
was through a lot of different work to get to a point where I could live within my skin,
Hmm.
and I could see someone. Eventually, it took me a long time getting to a point and choose not to lose my peace because somebody said something. They strung a whole bunch of words together, 7 or 8, 10 words,
Mm-hmm.
and now all of a sudden I've lost my center because of these 7 to 8 words that they've said that somehow I've taken
Mm-hmm.
and decided it's like
Right.
opening up my armor and
Right.
right. I've
Mhm.
allowed it to come in and hurt me
Hmm.
on that. And so
No, I didn't know that part about you. That's interesting. I wonder, I mean, I'd be curious to hear more about how that sort of transience affected your upbringing, but I wonder if I'd be so curious to see if you could get some traction with the forgiveness coaching. Is what is it that people are holding on to these days? And like, if there's common threads, and then that would be so insightful for the shape of things. But so much of it is, to me, is like people lack a lot of self-control and self-discipline,
mhm,
and thus are going out and trying to tell other people how to live. I'm a little bit skewed because it's like you're seeing it on social media, right? It's like, you
yeah,
must get the vaccine, you must vote this way, you must feel this way about this issue. But it's like, well, look at you. You're not, this person not living a great life, potentially, not taking care of themselves, you know,
right,
their
right.
their self
And there's well,
identities in disarray.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And opinions are like assholes. Everyone has one.
Right.
And there's no shortage of, and everyone's yelling that they have all the answers and whatnot. And this is part of the thing that's very empowering with the forgiveness cards, and
Yeah.
that is, it works or it doesn't work for you.
Hmm.
And I'm not here to tell anyone how to live their lives. I'm just saying, does this resonate with you? And is it something that, and with what I write about it, does it cause you to see the world in a way that's slightly different,
Hmm.
and make you, does it bring relief to your current existence that makes it a bit better?
Right.
I'm not expecting to change people's world. I am hoping to kind of erode at their erroneous beliefs are that we hold on to, that we suffer from because we have this belief.
Mm-hmm.
My value is based on my income, like,
Oof.
or how
Yeah.
many women I bed,
Mm-hmm.
or what kind of car I drive.
Mm-hmm.
And these are all the things that I they have been either stuff I have that have been my reality, or stuff that is still my reality,
Right.
right?
I don't mean to be distracted. I'm
Yeah.
actually starting to make time code marks on clips that I might like to pull.
Okay. Yeah,
So,
yeah, 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 because because I know that will save you
Yeah.
hours of work
Oh,
later, right?
I'm not going to listen to this again. I I love talking to you, but I mean, I lived it once.
Yeah,
That's been the deal. But so you're so right, man. Like those external factors and then those external measurements of value. I mean, they are useful, I think, for maybe measuring progress in your life. Where it's like, I used to drive a 2000 Subaru, and now I drive a 2017 Ford, and hopefully soon I'll drive a brand new whatever. But that's more
yeah,
of, is there some use in that maybe in using those externalities to measure at least?
yeah. And then it's then there's the gender thing of how our gender identifies with success,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the things that I think that we are, and I read this from Terrence Riel, which was he wrote a book called I Don't Want to Talk About It: The Secret Legacy of Depression in Men,
Hmm.
and one of the ways that Riel talks about how what we do as men
Mm-hmm.
to distance ourselves from intimacy
Right.
is we have different things on how we want, because
Mm-hmm.
intimacy is very scary for us. But one of the so we do things like we addictions, that's one of them.
Yep.
Overworking, making
Totally.
how much money we have, our status, that's another one. But the pinnacle of how we actually keep ourselves distant, emotionally distant from other people,
Mm-hmm.
is grandiosity.
Interesting.
And I didn't know what grandiosity. I'd heard the word, but I had to actually look. What is grandiosity? And it
Right.
was it's Italian for grandiose, which is godlike.
Interesting.
So
Very interesting.
so you've had this happen where you go to shake another man's hand and they're doing this kind of shit to you. Like it's a pissing contest right there.
Right.
They might as well be taking out their dick and just showing how big their Johnson is to have that.
Yeah. Get that
So
out there.
so yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
just so this need to set ourselves apart or see that other people are not um not as affluent or doesn't have it together is part of what men do. I know women do it too. They have a different curses than what men have, but it's that idea of wanting to think we're full of ourselves, that arrogance, that
Mm-hmm.
belief that we are better than others, which is really about propping up the self.
Mm-hmm.
It's small man syndrome in some
In
ways.
some ways, but
Yeah,
it's not. It can be more than that. It's like I myself don't believe that I'm worth anything unless I go out and crush this guy's hand, drive away in my Jaguar, and
yeah,
fuck 3 different women in the same day.
yeah, yeah. Exactly
Which
right.
sounds like a
Because
great
then
day, also. But I mean, you know,
um, so it's this idea that my value is based on external circumstances,
mm-hmm.
and yes, we should have a nice house, or we should have a safe accommodation to live in. We should have dependable transportation.
Mm-hmm.
I think our careers are really about fulfilling us, not about a job
Mm-hmm.
and not about just making money. All that is very important, but when we lose that status, what do we say about ourselves?
Then I'm
What
not.
what it, what?
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you hear the saying? And I've been playing with it. It's when you are what you do, then when you don't, you aren't. So if your
I've
whole
heard that. Yeah,
yeah, if your whole being is tied up in what you do, but then I also think, well, it's like what you do is who you are also. So then when you, I mean, so I don't know. I mean, it was one of those kitschy things that maybe it was actually totally pointless, but it raises the concern that we're talking about.
yeah, and it's really if it affords you the ability to stop and go, where do I
Right.
where's my value? How do I perceive my value?
Mm-hmm.
How do I um, there's one individual, you may know him, but he is really bent on creating content on his legacy and leaving a legacy behind. And the
Sure.
thing is that having a legacy is, because once we're dead, it doesn't matter what kind of legacy we're
It's
projecting into
true.
the future
Yeah.
about wanting to have this legacy, because why? To say that it was all worthwhile.
Right.
why
That's really interesting. Yeah.
yeah, and that somehow I made a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And so whatever we put out there as to point to say this is my legacy, this is what I've accomplished, is a is to fulfill the ego so that we feel that we have not, it's all been for naught. It's not a
It's
bad desire, but it's misplaced.
right.
Because if people who need to leave a legacy don't do that, then they're tortured because they believe that that's somehow their time on this planet was made worthwhile.
Right. You brought up an interesting word there, is that ego, and so much of it is ego related. Like there was he was like a French film theorist, like early, and he talked about like photography, sculptures, all that stuff is man's ego and man's need to be preserved after death into the future.
Right,
I don't
absolutely.
I don't personally get hung up on it because maybe I still have enough runway in front of me that I'm not freaking out. But have you found, since you've been older or you've met people who like this guy you're talking about, where suddenly legacy and ego just start to inflate because it's like, oh fuck, like what has it all been for?
Absolutely, because there was this the when I put a shingle out, to be a coach and to go on my own,
Mm-hmm.
which I had a lot of trepidation, as I already mentioned on that. Um, it was about making a big splash in the world, making and having this influence over all these people. And it wasn't about when I'm said and done. It's about some sort of validation here and now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the things that are the things that used to be important to, and I don't know if this is an age thing or if it's a Course in Miracles thing,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe it's a combination of both, but the stuff that used to be really important to me is gone by the wayside. It's not as important. With these forgiveness cards, these forgiveness declarations, do I want to make a living on it? Do I want to be able to have an impact? Yes,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not based on the fact that this is going to make me look good. I could be wrong. Maybe somewhere in the background that is happening,
Yep.
and I definitely know that with my ego and my need for attention and that kind of stuff, that this is definitely possible. But it's more along the lines of being able to, the satisfaction when somebody says to me, I I read your card and I was able to forgive this person who did this to me. That, like, I can think of no other way
Right.
to have a fulfilling life is to know that somehow I strung some words together, I put it on a picture, and they go, my life is better because of that.
Hmm. It's I can imagine. I mean, it's that I've had that a few times where people listen to the podcast and got some idea or got some help out of it. I guess, but again, it's that old human thing where it's like you're still relying on an external influence to come in and say what you did had value for me, and therefore it should have value in you. So I wonder, let's say you didn't make a single friend, let's say you actually lost friends by doing these cards, and let's say people told you you shouldn't be doing them because you're making people think too much or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Would you still find it useful for you if, I mean, you were learning to forgive all this stuff that had happened in your life?
When I just started the Facebook, the Instagram account, so that would have been back in September.
Mm.
I happened to show these to Sarah, who has been very influential in my life, and because she's influential in my life, I hold her in high esteem,
Mm-hmm.
and of course I wanted her approval of these because that was, yeah, that was important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a bit taken off, and she goes, yeah, these are really good, these are important, but they may be for the world, but they just may be for you, Luke.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, yes. So it was like, I have to admit, I was like, I didn't want to hear that, but it was just like, why am I doing this?
Right.
You know, and something else that is A Course in Miracles tenet, which is not different than other ones, but I'll just speak to that, is that this idea of, and I don't know of a better word to use for it, but I'm going to use it as, where does my salvation lie?
Mm.
Does where if really, when we're all said and done, if those of you that aren't of this, don't believe this, but when it's all said and done, when we rejoin God, will the things I do on this planet, will the car I drive, the job I hold, will any of that matter for when I connect back with God?
Right.
And it won't. What will matter is whether or not I've been able to forgive people for my perception of their harm to me, and will I be able to actually live a peaceful life regardless of what I make, what I drive, and my life, and what how my life shows up. And so part of the idea is that where do we when it's all said and done, what is really important? And that is what I'm doing right here, right now, how I serve,
Mm-hmm.
how I try to ease people's burden is all that counts right now. Not because I'm promised a place in heaven,
Mm-hmm.
because when I ease other people's burden, then I'm less alone.
Mm.
It's very selfish. It's actually very selfish to want to forgive and to help other people, because then I feel that the world makes sense.
Right. Right. Well, I think maybe that's the place you have to get to, is like, if salvation and understanding and relationship with God comes from within, then everything has to come from within, and I should actually forgive myself for being selfish, because I'm a self, and that's
Yeah,
all I really am.
yeah.
Does that seem right?
For,
So it's like,
well, so I forgive yourself for being well. First of all, selfish gets a bad rap
mm-hmm.
because we know that. What do we hear on airplanes every time we fly? If you're with somebody else, take care of yourself because you're not going to be any good to anyone else,
Right, right,
right?
exactly
So
right.
so it, yeah, so it does get a bad rap of you're being selfish and whatnot, and usually when you're being called selfish, it's because the other person's not liking what how much attention you're giving them or whatever you're doing for them.
Right.
It's a aspersion that somehow you've done something to them, and so now your behavior is their salvation,
Hmm.
because you didn't do the things for them to make them feel better. So now all of a sudden, I am now being harmed because you're not doing that because you're being selfish
Right.
on that, right?
It's it's totally just the conflict of all these selves floating around, and
Exactly,
we're looking
exactly.
to cling on to things that are they're outside of us. We keep going back
Yeah,
to that, but that's it, right?
yeah, yeah. And and the other thing is that um, there is there there is a point in time where people have to ask themselves, is it working? Does it is my am I fulfilled within my life?
Mm-hmm.
And there are many people who don't have to ask this question because they have a good life.
Right.
And there's no right or wrong with that. It's just like it's all it's we're all on this we're on this journey to try and figure out what it's all for. Through time, we've all
Right.
looked. Man has always looked up. Man and woman has always looked up at the stars and go, "What's its purpose? What's the meaning of it?"
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when we get to a point where we are able to, when we look and saying, I need something, there has to be more than that, then that's when we turn to a faith or often to a religion, because it's just and that's what I think in many ways why so many people find spirituality
Mm-hmm.
or religion in their 40s, because it's
Ah.
like, okay, I have the car, I have the career, I have the 2.3 kids, I've got the ex-wife, I've got the vacation property, I've got the stuff.
Right. And
WTF?
and I still hate myself on some
Yeah,
level.
yeah, and I'm still empty, and I've done it. I've done everything I was told to do.
Mm-hmm.
I got a career. I got the relationship. I have all that.
Mm-hmm.
Kids are starting to move out. They're on their own, and that's why you see a lot of divorces come up in
Mm.
their, in the 40, because
I've
it's
heard that. Yeah.
like, yeah, I've done 2 decades or 3 decades with you. I'm not doing another three.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and
Sure.
and it, and we get to that point where Carl Jung, and one of my favorite things from him was he coined the term the morning of your life or the afternoon of your life.
Hmm.
And so we live two lives. The morning of our life is about accumulation, is about getting established, it's about finding relationships, finding what we're supposed to be doing. And we get to a point where we go, okay, I have all this, like I mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, what do I want to do with the rest of my life? My basic needs are taken care of. I'm going
Right.
to survive. I have in the retirement. Well, now what? And so as you transition from them, and it's usually from your 40s to your 50s, it could be
Okay.
sooner, it could be later. It's there's no hard and fix. But as you transition from the morning of your life to your afternoon of your life, what goes by the wayside? Well, we go for we go from quantity to quality.
Hmm.
We need less. We want more solid relationships as opposed to many
Mm.
relationships. And what could happen is one good connection with a friend can last you for a week, whereas in the morning of your life, you have to have many connections every day
Right.
to kind of feel that.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we step into our afternoon of our life, our priorities shift and we see the world very differently
Hmm.
and we make different choices. And we decide who we want to spend our time with. And somewhere in there it comes in, yeah, I was married into, sorry, I was born into this family, but does this family serve me?
That's
and
huge.
and that's yeah, and for a lot of people that's where they get to their 30s.
Right.
It's just like, I have four siblings, I don't talk to any of them,
Damn.
and it's just we're estranged, and it's just, and it's not, they're not assholes, I'm not an asshole, we just doesn't work.
Hmm.
And it's, I do I wish it could be different, not enough to do something about it.
Right. Right. Sure.
Right. Yeah.
Man, that's wild stuff. I I had a bunch of things, and then you kept going, and I was like, damn, I'm just gonna listen and not be thinking about what I'm gonna say next. But um, yeah, you just stunned me right there with that one.
Okay. Okay.
What
So I am curious about what you've learned about yourself in this process, because is it safe to say, Patrick, that 10 years ago, if somebody was said to you, you're going to be doing this, you would have thought
uh,
like,
oh, completely
yeah,
in like, 'cause this is essentially a talk show. You
yeah,
know, you call it
yeah,
whatever you
absolutely.
want, but it's talk show.
Yeah.
And when I was in like high school into early college years, I detested people that talked too much. So I've essentially done a 180 in 10 years to now being the power of conversation and expressing verbally in real time is crucial to self development. And
Right.
I was doing myself
Absolutely.
a lot of disservice by being afraid to talk all those
Yeah.
years.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is that it's not as if you don't present well. It's not as if you're not, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Engaging. It's
Mm-hmm.
not as if you don't, you interweave these things into the conversation about some of the things that had an impact on you.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I was like, I'm glad you're choosing to no longer play small.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think you have
Yeah.
to. And a lot of what you've been saying has really been resonating with some stuff I went on a rant about in the summer about this idea of temporal instability, meaning we sometimes live in the past, and that's where depression can come from. We're living in
Yep.
the future, that's where anxiety can come from. And, you know, time is infinite. And if we could just seize what we have in the moment is where maybe where we can find meaning, or at least where we can find a certain amount of peace. But
Absolutely. Well, so part of so much of what I worry about hasn't come to be,
right. Right.
right?
But
And
in
and
a
I
way it
and
has, because you lived it in your mind.
that's actually an excellent point. That's actually an excellent point, because I'm no longer in the here and now. I'm
Mm-hmm.
in the there and then.
Right.
And
Right.
so one of the things that I will do in my meditation, especially when I am tortured and I'm not happy,
Mm-hmm.
and I about a month ago I went through a spout of, I actually was saying, am I depressed? Am I
Right.
like, I it was this overarching oppression I was feeling, and I was in so much fucking fear. I was so afraid of the future and whatnot.
Hmm.
And then through guidance or whatnot, I'm not sure what happened, but the thought came to me, and that is, yes, because you're not working, you may lose your house. Yes, you may lose your Lexus. Yes, these things may happen,
Right.
but they're not happening right now.
Right.
In this moment, there's no one taking your Lexus. There's no one taking your house. There's a lot of water that has to go under the bridge before any of those are remotely possible. And as if, I don't have resources where I can go to people and say, hey, I need a hand here, because on that. So
Right.
so so the practice I engaged in was simply this: of when that comes in, saying, and that's ego talking
Right.
to basically keep us in fear and keep us, because the ego has two jobs.
Hmm.
The first one, pardon me, the first one is call attention to itself, and
Right.
the second is to never be out of work.
Yeah,
It
he's
never
a
is
hard
never right.
worker for sure.
Yeah, as a hard worker, right? So 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 what I would say in my when I'm trying to get my center and trying just to stop the noise so I can listen for guidance and
Right.
go, what am I to do next? When that merry-go-round of mental masturbation, quite frankly,
Mm-hmm.
of just going and going and going, what I've done, which helps, is yes, that may happen, but it's not happening. So I'm going to take you, this
Sure.
fear.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to put you right here. It's not going. I see you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and thank you for keeping and worrying about the future for me.
Right.
Put it there, right here, right now. I'm just going to focus on what's going on.
Right.
And the thing that has helped my practice so much is, and I I don't know if I would have believed it 10 years ago if
Mm-hmm.
I had somebody, going back 10 years, somebody said this to me, but being in gratitude about what goes well, to be able to stop and go, my furnace is working.
Right.
I have in this day, we're getting to winter and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
I have a roof over my head. I've got two outstanding kids. I have an incredible relationship with my ex-wife where we actually like and respect each other. My son just got accepted to Concordia University,
Nice.
and so we all went out for supper. My ex-wife
Wow.
and me and my kids to celebrate him doing this,
That's
and it
beautiful.
was yeah, and so when I can stop and appreciate the hundreds of things that are going well in this moment, as opposed to the one thing that might not go well, it literally changes it depending on how bad the noise is.
Right. Right.
It brings me relief or it removes it altogether. And that is my practice
Mm-hmm.
when I'm off my center and I'm in fear, I will write out a page of what I have appreciation and gratitude.
Nice. It's
Right?
so useful because, right, and I wonder how much of the ills of in society today are what we talked about, this loss of religion, this loss of a higher
Yeah.
power, but also this inflation of the ego where suddenly, well, this is how I see things. Certainly this must be how you should see things, and I'm
Yeah.
going to now impose that on you, and if you don't, I'm going to crush your hand or I'm going to walk on
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, because it's this it's almost like a good defense is a good offense, right? So if you're the loudest in the room, then you must be the most right.
Right.
Some kind of mentality and whatnot.
Yep.
But it's really based on so much fear and anxiety about that. So we posture or we engage in this kind of look how great I am type of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
To hold off at bay that fear that we're not.
Exactly right. Hold off
Yeah.
and fear the bait. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You
Well,
said
and
it.
this may not be popular, but this is what homophobic is about. Being homophobia or being homophobic
Sure.
is really about the fear that you're gay, so that you have to actually. So instead of looking at, gee, am I gay? Well, then I'll just hate everyone else that is gay,
Sure.
because it really is. Because if you're not, why would that bother you? If someone's like I'm not talking about stuff that's doing it to children and whatnot, but if someone
Right.
is sexual preference is not yours and
Mm-hmm.
it's not harming anyone, why is that a problem?
Right.
Well, it's a threat to your construct of
Sure.
who you are, of your script.
Right.
And so
Right. Your
so instead of
script. Yeah.
yeah, and so instead of saying, oh, I'm threatened how successful Patrick is, I'm threatened by that, I'll just attack you,
Right.
and it'll make it that much easier.
Totally. I wonder how, I'm sure so many mental conditions are a result of that sort of whatever suppression. I want to
Yeah.
bounce something off you that I tried this. I tried this on some guests last or 2 nights ago, and they kind of were like, "What the fuck is this guy talking about?" But
Okay.
it might be useful because you're kind of doing it. But I started thinking about the problem at large is communication between people generally, and it's that
Okay.
I can't communicate my problems to you because you don't actually know what it's like to be me. That's kind of a philosophical assertion, but I don't know what it's like to be Luke. So when you tell me these things about your ex-wife and your kids, it's like I can understand the value, but I don't actually know what that's like.
Okay.
So then is there, and then now let's say it was a problem. Let's say you actually hated your ex-wife and now you're telling me these things and now suddenly I hate your ex-wife when I don't even know her, but I've been infused with this hatred. And now the problem is
Yeah.
actually doubled.
Yeah.
I've started
Yeah.
thinking maybe it's not truly possible. Like there's this culture now of talk about your problems, go on social
Mhm.
media, overshare, whatever. Maybe that actually isn't helping things. And maybe there's, I don't know what the substitute is, but it's like maybe the idea that you can talk to me about your problems and I'm going to have any kind of solution besides a question. Maybe that's a fallacy. And maybe we expect too much, or the mode of communication is wrong.
Well, I think in some points what we're talking about is a point of entry and intention, because I'm all about intention. Is
Mm-hmm.
what is the purpose of what we're doing? So if my intention is to have you commiserate with me,
Mm-hmm.
then I'm going to find people that are going to commiserate as to how awful my ex-wife is.
Right.
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 And somebody
Right.
once said to me, let's see if I can do this without being too confusing. So somebody I asked I somebody once said to me, Luke, what you're going to get from me when you talk to me. You know where I come in on this. So why are you surprised that I'm telling you something you don't want to hear?
Mm-hmm.
So
Interesting.
we have a tendency to go to people who are going to tell us, if people will come to me when they want the world according to Luke and the straight goods.
Nice.
And I'll say, this is the way I see it.
Right.
If they don't want that, they're not going to come to me.
Right.
So this is, I think, part of the, picking my words very carefully here. This is part of the, because I'm really working on not trying to judge anyone or judge any situation, because it doesn't
Nice.
serve me.
Right.
Because it just judges myself. This is, I think, the outcome of how social media sites such as Facebook are set up. That, and if I had one thing that I could express to the world, and that is, you're only being fed back what you believe.
Mm.
You're only seeing, especially on Facebook, you're only receiving what you actually believe out there. And any dissenting voices, you will unfriend and not share them. So you constantly get that same. So it's this feedback loop that reinforces it and causes us to believe that our assertions are correct, that what we're seeing is real.
Right. What is that called?
And
Confirmation bias?
yeah, so yeah, absolutely, that's correct. Yeah, good call on that. So if so are we just wanting to bitch and complain about our lives, or do we want to see it differently?
Right.
And so we generally know who we're going to talk to, whether or not they're going to agree or disagree.
Right.
And so it just basically reinforces whatever thought systems you already have. And
Right.
there's nothing wrong with that,
right.
but yeah, but just acknowledge, or just, you don't have to do anything, but just the idea that you are going to get what you expect.
Right.
You're going to get what you want. And if you want open dialogue and conversation, and you're only talking to people that believe the same thing you do, if you really want to see someone's opinion differently, that's where you're able to go, how do you see it? Which we don't do. I think I only want to hear what I want to hear.
Right. I think that's important as I pursue this idea. I always think about this time years ago when a friend of mine, he basically asked me what he should do in his relationship, and being 22 and thinking that I was, a smart guy, I just told him, it sounds like she wants out of the relationship. I think you should break up with her. And he did. And of course that was his action, but he trusted me and he listened to me and he did it based on what I told him. And that it crushed this girl. And we still even talk about it today. It's like, that girl, she still shows up in his life and she still loves him. And there's still something there, right? So what I probably should have done was just asked a dozen more questions. So what I've said related to the other issue is to this idea of communication is that you can't give advice to people. You really can't. And I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and she said the answer to life is a question. And I could have just exploded and rejoined the universe at that point, because that really made sense to me. It's like, I can't tell you what to do, right?
Right.
But I can keep asking questions until we come to a better understanding of this infinite depth of possibility.
Right. And a sociology professor said to me once, one of the most powerful statements you can make is, I don't know.
Right.
Because it's like, I don't know what you should do. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think you should do? I don't know. It's like, and again, I think this is more of a male thing, that we can't admit we don't know something, but the power of being able to surrender and go, I don't know, and let go of the egoic thought that we have to know everything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of the things that I determined in my services for creating content for my clients is that I ask really hard questions when I create content for people. Like, what do you sell? Apple doesn't sell computers; it sells ease of use.
Mm-hmm.
Nike doesn't sell shoes; it sells a footwear. If it sells a lifestyle, and
Mm-hmm.
Molson Canadian sells party, not beer. And then I have other questions, and I realize that the people I cannot work with are the ones that can't say, I don't know.
Right.
Because there's no humility. There's no
Right.
ability to go, oh, gee, that's a good question. And I know I should answer that. I know I should have an answer to that. And that was one of my fastest ways of weeding out people, or not trying to pursue them, is the inability to say, I don't know. Right.
Damn,
and I think we are definitely afraid of people seeing our warts and wrinkles. We want them to see our wonderment, but we don't want them to see our warts and wrinkles.
That's absolutely true. Man, I wish it didn't have to end, but I think we'll do it again sooner than later.
I would definitely enjoy that. Thank you very much for having me back on your show. And 90, did you say 80?
Getting
90?
into the mid 80s now, yeah.
Mid 80s, yeah. That anyone. The only reason I know how impressive that is because of how many I did.
Yeah.
And that's no small feat to have that commitment and be able to wrap your world around it and still make a living in everything that you're doing. So thank you so much for your time, Patrick. I really enjoyed this.
Hey, my pleasure, Luke. And you've been an influence on this, pursuing this line in my life. So I'm glad we reconnected.
Yeah.
If people do want to find you on social media and see these reductions or get to know more about you, what's kind of the best way to do that?
I should have that ready. So if you, I just changed my tag on Facebook, so it's going to be, I don't want to give out the wrong one. That's here. Right.
I can snip this, but
if you put them in there, but it's going to be Luc Bouchard. Will get you the other Luc Bouchards, but yeah, you see, I'm not even ready for that. So
that's okay. I would invite people to look up Luc Bouchard on Facebook, find him. You can see what he looks like, and these reductions, I think, there's something here they're like pop spirituality or whatever you want to say, but I mean, they're great, man.
They're definitely sound bites. They're definitely sound bites.
You've hit
and
something.
people have said that they want less and not more. So I'm narrowing that down in our consumer-based mentality,
endeavoring to bring less to the world.
That's right. Well, I am a brevity specialist.
There we go. Oh man, love it. Okay, Luke. Well, again, thanks, buddy. And I mean, let's do it again. Let's not let a year go by.
Absolutely. Okay, take care.
You too. Thank you for listening to the North Bank Media Podcast. If you enjoy this conversation, please subscribe on YouTube and give us a like. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe as well and leave a 5-star review.